I'm Mr. Tom, and I like to paint silly things. Welcome to Acutely Believable Creatures. Now, if you've been paying attention this week to the reels and shorts and whatnot, you might remember this guy. He was our original idea for the Great Googly Moogly theme. However, it just didn't fit the bill. It was a little stiff and a little rigid, kind of just stood there. And yes, in name, he did kind of look like the Great Googly Moogly, but I had a better idea. More frog-like idea. And it's okay. Sometimes, when you get into a creative process, you change ideas. And you go with what feels better. Truth be told, I didn't want to just draw another monster and kind of shoehorn him into the theme of, the Great Googly Moogly. So I wanted it to be a little bit more story-driven, and I had an idea that involved the frog. Now for me, frogs are right up there with horses and hands, that are that level of difficulty to draw, because their legs don't make sense, they're round but not quite round. Expressions on frogs are really hard to get down. And these eyes, they're super weird. They're bulgy. Doesn't make sense. But this is why I love the sketching process, because you take all these ideas, you fill a page with them, you take an idea from this sketch, you apply it to another one, change a pose, a line here or there, and sometimes you gotta fill up a couple of pages of ideas until you get the final one. This guy in particular is speaking to me, so I keep messing with him because I feel like this is the direction I definitely want to go. Okay, so the whole idea of changing from the original sketch to this was, like I said, I wanted to be story-driven. And the story is that this tree was the wisest thing in the forest, and it used to pass on knowledge and wisdom and stories to all the woodland creatures. And one day it fell. And everybody was super sad and missed the tree, but then this frog comes along and he sits on the stump of that tree and passes along the same wisdom, the same stories to all the woodland creatures. So it's like the tree's gone, but this species of frog, the Googly Moogly, moves in and fills the hole left by the tree. Now I'm going to tackle this tree stump. I'm really excited about this detail because it's going to visually cut the image in half, and you can fit so much detail with some really, really simple line variations. I want to add some vegetation on the sides for some simple world building, and hopefully it'll fit the narrative of some new life springing forth from this long lost tree. There's still some fidgety details with arms and legs and stuff, but the pose I want to be inviting yet confident and warm and welcoming to anyone that will listen. Watercolor is an exercise in patience, but still I like to have all of my stuff laid out for me and in its proper little place before I even get started. So this little piece of scrap paper that I'm taping down, I use that to test my colors, my mixes and opacities. But when it gets full up of tons of little shapes and blobs, I take my pens and I try to make stuff out of them. Little faces, little objects, whatever the shape reminds me of. But then I'll laminate them, use them as bookmarks, and I give them to people. But you can only give away so many before people stop being polite about them. Because how many bookmarks do you really need? So the Googly Moogly frog is going to be pretty straightforward. Lots of greens, some yellows, and then we'll do a wash over the whole thing to kind of mesh all those colors together, soften the edges. Sometimes if you paint the same color all over, instead of in sections like I'm doing here with the front half of the body, when they dry, they seem a little flat, and it's harder to introduce shade and depth after they've dried. So I painted the legs separately because they're behind the body. Now the tree trunk, this is legit the most fun part of the whole thing, because when you're done doing these simple little things, it looks like you put a lot more effort into it. So you just take a bunch of wood-like colors, some darks, some yellows, some browns, and you kind of mix them in wet. And as they dry, they'll start to look like this. One half will be lighter, the other parts will be a little darker, and it introduces texture, and it's really low effort. But sometimes when they dry, they do come out a little flat. So you can do a whole wash, like one mid-tone color over the whole thing. It's a lot of water and a little bit of pigment, and what that does is kind of tints everything, gives it a more uniform look, and it reactivates some of those pigments, and they kind of get moved around a little bit. The blending gets a little easier. So this is big brain stuff with little effort. Now we play the cleanup song because you spend most of your time with a 3-year-old, and put away all the stuff you're done playing with, and lay out all your tools for the next job, which of course is inking. My third favorite part? Second favorite part. Third favorite part. I'm of course using my favorite pens in the world. They are cheap, inexpensive, readily available, and waterproof. The most important part. Alright, if you've been doing your daily sketching exercises, you know how important line weight is. And for this part, it is super important. You want to vary the pressure. You don't necessarily want all the lines to connect in the single stroke. And the more variation, I think the better in this case, because I want this to be like a gnarled tree bark. Now just go around picking out the rest of the details. I always leave my thickest or heaviest lines for the outline around the whole thing, or things that are in the foreground. Those usually have a heavier line weight. But generally speaking, everything in the middle is an 02, and everything along the outside is an 05. Remember when I said the most important part of your inks is that they're waterproof? Well, this is why. Sometimes, after everything's dry and you've laid down your ink, things can look a little flat. So if you have to go in and add some shadows, it's not a big deal because your inks won't smear or run. Just remember your art basics and don't use straight black to shade anything. I found this really nice transparent dark brown, which if you add enough water to it, let some of that base color still shine through. And it comes out with a pretty warm shadow. Now, if I wanted a cool shadow, or a cold shadow, really, I would use something in the blue family. Pretty watered down at first and then build up from there. Now, once my shadows are dry, I'm going to hit the tree trunk one more time with a nice wash, just to give a nice warm yellow glow to the whole thing. If you made it this far in the video, I really do appreciate you. Thanks for hanging out and watching me paint. And if you have any questions, hopefully you learned something. If you have any questions, though, just let me know in the comments below, and I would be happy to answer them. The Great Googly Moogly original will be up in the shop, as well as some of my prints and other original stuff. Links in the description. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that hot mess. That way you can follow along with the next art project. So far, we're on track to do one every week. We break down the whole process in reels and stories, so you can follow along on Instagram or here on YouTube. And at the end of the week, we post videos like this with the full description of how we did it. So until next time, friends, hugs and high fives.